Namaste everyone. I welcome you all to today's session on the topic transformation, self-check, and the speaker of the day is Sister Vimal Balachandra. So before starting this session, let us all sit in meditation followed by the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden life, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each one who feels himself as one with thee know he is therefore one with every other. Come back, everyone. Now we'd like to welcome Sister Vimal Balachandra. Sister Vimal Balachandra is an architect, artist, and a member at Adya Lodge, Chennai from 2010. She briefly volunteered at the Theosophical Library and Bookshop. She volunteers for online programs, writes a blog, and makes videos on her learnings in Theosophy. She volunteers at Adyar for some programs as well. From 2015 to 2019, she had also started a special needs support center for families of special children. She is supported in her quest for a morally upright life by her husband, Balachandra, and children, a daughter who is a lawyer, and a son who is an artist. Welcome, sister. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pooja, and thank you so much, Prayas Lodge, and everyone who is present here. So when this topic came up in my mind to discuss about transformation, the title I had given it is, Have We Really Changed? And then this nice catchy title was suggested by Suralina, Transformation, a Self-Check. In a way, it is a self-check because I'm checking on whether I have personally transformed. As you just heard, I have joined the society 15 years ago, and I have attended numerous programs, numerous School of Wisdoms, conventions, heard so many lectures, read so many books. But has that fundamentally transformed me? So I made a checklist on the things that I think concern me. The first is, has there been a change in my emotional reactions? And have I healed from old wounds? Second is, have I changed from a self-centered way of thinking? Third is, have I changed in my acceptance of societal norms and my acceptance of traditions? So let us see how I have progressed in this matter. Before I discuss my own journey, I just want to bring the theosophic perspective into this. You're all students, so you know we are in the fourth round of the chains, rounds, globes and all. We are in the fourth round, and in the fourth round it is the astral body which develops fully. Now the astral body is actually our emotional body. When we talk about the development of the astral body, we don't mean the negative emotions. We mean only the positive emotions of sympathy, compassion, love, sense of religious feeling. These kinds of feelings to develop to their full and final potential. So these two images have been taken from this book written by erstwhile president of Theosophical Society in America, Dora Kunz. She wrote these books, and she wrote this book called The Personal Aura, and also she wrote many books on therapeutic touch, a form of healing of this astral body and the etheric body, something like pranic healing, but little different. So in this book, she talks about how our etheric, this astral body is formed, I mean, is shaped by certain emotions that are in a way like ideal for us, like whatever is above us, above this green line, are the things that are ideal. Every one of us have one green band in between this auric form of our astral body, and above that are the colors which are the ideal emotions. Like pink represents love, and green represents empathy. Blue is a religious feeling. So these are the ideal emotions which are in the upper part of this astral body. The lower part is the things that are normally there, the normal actual things. So what she says is people who meditate. Now this one on the left, you see the upper and lower are totally different from each other. So some colors are seen in both, but they are totally different. But on the one on the right, you see it's a much more organized body. The colors are all beautifully placed, one above the other. There's a layering, and you see that she writes, this is a person who meditates. So this is something she has said about the astral body. So now let's jump back to me. Have I changed? So when I thought about this question, whom do I ask? I asked my husband, I asked my daughter, and both of them said that you have become calmer. So this is something I also know, that I have become calmer. Another thing I know is that I no longer try to change anybody else. However they behave with me, whatever they do, I don't try to change them. If they are behaving in a way which is hurting me, I just quietly move away. That is something I have been practicing for a long time. So now I realize that that is the one good change that has happened. It's earlier I should try and change people. Now I change only myself. So this much I know. But I do also know that theosophic knowledge does not change you. For many years, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the core theosophic knowledge. And then I realized, you realize that none of the knowledge is useful when you get hurt or something goes wrong, which you are not expecting to happen, and all the emotions of come up. And that's when you know that none of the philosophical knowledge is really penetrating to your actual daily life. So then I made a list of things that I really wanted to change in myself. And these are some of the things. Like, for example, I tend to judge people too soon. So even when I get some idea, get some red flags, even then I will keep to my first judgment. I will not rethink that first judgment, which is something wrong. In fact, I shouldn't even judge. I should keep waiting and watching until I have some time with that person to know who they really are. Second thing is, I tend to trust too soon and not really judge too fast. I trust too soon, which also is a very bad thing, unless you're trusting in an animal or you're trusting in some money in the bank. Both of these things will have some integrity. They will be the way they are, but not humans. Humans are the most fickle-minded people. Then the third thing is, I find it very difficult to control the negative spiral of emotions which happens inside me when I'm hurt. It really is tough. It goes on sometimes for days, weeks, until I really have to work hard to control that negative thinking. Then there is, in this atmosphere that we live in with all the financial uncertainties, I also live with a certain amount of financial insecurity. Even though I'm comfortably off, but still there is, I'm aging, I don't know what is ahead of me, that insecurity. And then there is, of course, although I know everything about what happens post-death, I know all the planes of the astral plane that one I will have to go through. I know Devachan, I know all that. But really, if I'm faced with the death of a person whom I really love, how will I take it? So I know that the philosophy is there, but it has to penetrate more inside me. So I've been thinking on how to change myself in a more more concrete way. Because the thing is that see, when we want to change our bodies, we put a list of things that we have to do, whether it's a diet or exercise or anything. But when we have to change our mind, we don't make such lists. We just think that listening to things or reading some things is enough. But I realize now that it is not possible to change your mind and your way of approaching your feelings unless you're very clear in that. And this thing, these tendencies that I've been talking about are there from many past births. Now, change is something is very fundamental to our theosophical philosophy. It is mentioned in our mission statement. Krishnamurti talks about the urgency of change. It's a very fundamental part because, see, though we've changed from animals to human, animals, it's okay for animals to be selfish and self-centered. But when we became humans, our next step is to become unselfish. Our next step is to be able to sacrifice for others and to have an other-centered way of thinking. But that step is not easy to come to. Now, in the process, we do so many actions whose effects we face birth after birth, which is what Buddha discovered in that day and night when he received that enlightenment. His enlightenment was essentially that he saw the cause and effect of his various past births. So that was called the 12 Nidanas, or cause and effect. So this led to this led to this, and this is why I suffered. And that led him to realize that there is a right way of leading life which will not have any effect and does not have any suffering. So let me take the first example of change in emotional reactions. For example, I meet somebody who has hurt me in the past, though that person, he or she, is not aware of the fact, and I am going to meet that person again. Days before meeting that person, my mind will be clogged with repetitive replay of the hurt sequence, and I'll also start developing reactionary counterattacks on arguments or some method of dealing with that person, so that he or she does not hurt me again. In a way, I'm trying to protect myself. Theosophically, we know that an old injury can again become completely present because of these things called elementals, which are there in our Kama Rupa body. These are our push buttons, our memories, and they get awakened if a similar experience happens again. So knowing that, I prepare myself with all kinds of thought process. But I know at that moment, so anything can happen. At that moment, with all this cognitive protective gear that I have got, I don't know how it will go. Whereas I found through my study that instead of developing all these cognitive ideas and approaches and defense mechanisms, a better method, there are two methods. Both are connected to meditation. One is the metta meditation, in which the person who has hurt me, I give out this loving energy, loving kindness energy, wishing well for that person. I do it for a couple of minutes. I do it as often as I want to do it. And this is called the Brahma Vihara of metta meditation. Why is it called a Brahma Vihara? Is the abode of Brahma, or a sort of objective that we can have in our life, a pure objective. So that's why it's called a Brahma Vihara. And this is one way to deal with the negative emotion, like an anxiety that I have. Another meditation is to see things exactly as they are. For example, I'm thinking of this person whom I'm going to meet, which is developing anxiety in me. When I see the anxiety, I say to myself, I see the anxiety. I see the anxiety. Here is the anxiety. Here is the worry. I just see it. I don't do anything about it. I don't push it away. I just let it be. This is also a type of meditation suggested by the Buddha. So it's like you just let it be. You watch it. You'll see the power of that energy, that fear that comes about automatically subsides. And this is also one method to deal with one's emotions. So these two is something I have been developing. And if you notice, what I have done in this is that I have not, if I had developed all these counter attacks, this would be some kind of action I would be taking, which would be karma. But if I don't develop anything from neutral, completely neutral, what it is called a karma, which is no action, literally. There is nothing. And in a way, you freed yourself from this give and take between you and that other person. So this is one idea that I had for dealing with emotions which are troubling. Now let's look at another thing which is very difficult for all of us, which is moving from selfishness to selflessness. All of us are always thinking about ourselves. It's not uncommon and it's very, very natural. What do I really want? All the time. Even when one is doing something selflessly, one may still have an element of selfishness in that. So the way to think about the other is to see what they need. What does the other person need rather than what I want? And that way of thinking is called the Brahma Vihara of Karuna. There are 4 Brahma Viharas. So we have covered Metta. Second is Karuna. Metta is loving kindness. Karuna is compassion. So we develop this way of thinking that what does the other person need? Obviously, all through the day, all through our week, we do not want to think what the other person needs. But there will be times during our day-to-day life when we realize something. What do you think? What do I think my mother needs at this stage, or my brother or sister or my colleague needs? And do that one small thing, which has nothing to do with you. It's only to bring joy to that other person. And that is such a beautiful thing. When you do that, you immediately go into a beautiful space. That's another way of change, another thing that we need to change about ourselves. Third item which was on my list is how society affects us. See, in our society, we have got a lot of inspirational ideas. Damodar Malvankar kicked up the whole caste system aside. He was born a Brahmin, that too a rich one. He kicked it all aside and decided to join the society, gave up all of it. And it is said that he was the only one at that time among all the chelas and all the aspirants who actually became an adept. That's what HPV said about Malvalankar. So that was the kind of fight that he had to make against the society of the 1880s, which was so much more Brahminical and such a strict society it was at that. I mean, the Indian society was like that. So apart from that, you know the story of Olcott, who started the schools called the Panchama schools. You know, what is the Panchama? Panchama is the other people who are the fifth caste, fifth caste, which means they are not among the 4 caste system at all. They are outside the caste system, so they are called the Panchamas. And he started the schools for these children because he found once when he was taking a bath on the Adyar River that these children were playing and not going to any school, and that they didn't go to any school because no school would take them. So out of sheer pity, with no money, his first school was literally a hut. And then he developed many more schools in that line. So people who've done something, when they saw a societal evil, they decided to do something for somebody else. That kind of a change is what we also have to think about when we see how certain things society takes for granted, and we also have taken it for granted. But we are also part of society in our cruelty and in our selfishness. Like for many years, nowadays I think it's a little more common, but earlier, 10, 15 years ago, I used to keep fighting it and telling all my friends that give your Sundays off to the people who work for you, the house workers. People don't even get one Sunday off. It's so unfair that the people who work in our homes do not get even a Sunday off, just because it is not a norm in society. That's not fair. So there are so many such things now that we can also identify in society which needs to be changed. We can read what Krishnamurti says about this. He says, we are trained from childhood to compete, to be cruel, to fit into society. As long as we are educated to fit into society, we will invariably be cruel because society is based on violence. So this is another thing. Because we want societal acceptance, we agree to become cruel. So we can easily say that that's not what I want to become. I don't want to become cruel, so I will not accept something which society says is right. Then the final fourth thing is about accepting traditional activities, actions. For example, now the tradition is a lot of gift giving, over celebration of very small incidents, lot of expenditure done for celebratory gift giving and decorations and food. Whereas that money can easily go to pay somebody's medical bills or some child's school fees, someone who is really in need. Are we really that blind that we think that people are not in need? Are we? How can we be that blind? So we really need to see and explain that this is something I believe in. I don't believe in giving a gift to someone who already has everything. So sorry, please accept my apology, but I'm saving up for some other purpose. Do we have the courage to go against such traditions? We do see such very nice examples of people who don't spend on lavish weddings, who have some eco-friendly weddings. I saw one couple who decided not to marry but invested all the money that was meant for their marriage on a flat and had one puja for the flat and their marriage in that flat. So it was such a simple, nice, practical idea. Good way to start their life. Simple things like that. We at least we theosophists who call ourselves people who follow the truth, can see the fakery of following traditions. It is only out of fear. We are only afraid of what people will say about us. But if that is there, then how can we call ourselves spiritual? Because then we are only living in a sort of a pattern of fear. So these are the things that are there in our lives that we all could look at, that we need to change about ourselves. And all our thought patterns actually come to a large extent due to our present lives, conditioning, our schooling, college, our parents, etc., but also from our past birth. Now, there is this study that is going on in Hindi, in the Indian section of the book, The First Principles of Theosophy, every Sunday. And it is a beautiful explanation of theosophy in charts and pictures, etc. So in that, Jina Rajadasa, the author, says about the mind. See, we normally are working with our lower mind only. But this other mind, the higher mind, which we call in theosophy, he says about that, the function of the abstract thought is to transform all experiences of the mental and lower bodies into eternal concepts, which can be incorporated into the soul's nature. So what is he saying? He's saying that, for example, you have realized in this birth that kindness is fundamental. You have to be kind even to the worst person in the world. Now, if that learning is something you have derived from your analysis and your learning in this birth, that is a concept which becomes eternal in your mind, and it will be something you'll be born with even in the next birth. So, for example, you meet some small children who are by nature very calm and kind, but then you realize that these are qualities that has been incorporated in that child's soul, and that is what is visible to people. So how does, even for some children, you see a certain way of acting, they will always do the right action. How is it that one person is always able to do the right action and another person is struggling to find what is the right action? So this is all because of the way the mind has developed, that abstract mind. If that abstract or higher mind had understood certain things, that understanding will take it forward to next births. So this is a suggestion that I have, which is to have some small diary, a red book somewhere, in which you write down what it is that you don't want to forget, the things that you have learned in this birth, which you want to take forward, which you do not ever want to forget. It would be a good idea to write some of these universal truths, which in any birth, wherever you're born, whichever part of the world, in whichever time and whatever gender, will be useful for you. So these are what become part of what we call our permanent atoms, and In Buddhism, they are called sanskars. And as you saw right now, that when we are trying to transform ourselves, how did we do it? We used two meditations, as we saw the metta meditation, and the second meditation was seeing things arise, seeing things as they are. What is another word we use for that? Choiceless awareness. So choiceless awareness is a form of meditation where you see things as they are, and you don't do any action to change it, but by just seeing it as it is, it changes. So now when there are certain resolutions, for example, apart from making such lists, we can also make certain resolutions for our own mind. For example, you could say that today I will not think critically of anyone, or this week I will not worry too much about the future, or this month I will aim not to say a harsh word to anybody. These are beautiful, simple resolutions that also help to change oneself. And this also is something we got to experiment in to see what are the resolutions we could stick to and what are just superfluous. Now, there is a memory in nature. So in a way, whatever humanity has already done affects us. We know about the astral light and the memory of nature. Now, all that past and our own past also affects us. If you think about it, that we are just a dot in the solar system, yet we humans are so aggressive, so cruel, and so hateful. And actually, they say that the center of this whole, the evolution itself is the divine center, is pervaded by truth, intelligence, and bliss. But why is my life so dark and heavy? Why cannot I make myself sing with that same song of love and harmony and be completely well adjusted with that divine center? Why is there such a struggle in life to find that center of peace, that happiness, and that source? So in this context, this whole aspect of how the entire history of humanity also affects our present time. The Mahachohan's letter says something. It says that the struggle for life is the most real and prolific parent of most woes and sorrows and all crimes. What does that mean? It means that because we are always struggling to compete, to become better than before, to prove ourselves to somebody, to achieve something. And also, one more statement has been made in the Mahatma letter. They say that Buddhism is the only religion which taught humans to have a contempt for of life, a healthy contempt for life, which means a healthy contempt for this constant craving, constant wanting, which does not ever end. So, because all around us we find people are not like this. People are constantly setting actual materialistic goals for their lives, and they think that if they don't do that, they have lost something. Krishnamurti also said the same thing. He said, be nothing. Don't struggle to become somebody, just be nothing. Because in that nothingness, there is everything. In that shunyata, there is everything. So this whole struggling of humanity is a collective conditioning, a struggle to become something. Whereas all we need to do is to make our mind, the quality of our mind and the quality of our emotions as harmless, as pure and beautiful as possible. That's where lies our happiness. That's where lies our beauty. The purer we make our mind, without any anger, without any reactions, without any anxiety or fear, the better quality human we have developed of our own selves. And that is really the only struggle that we should ever take on. None of these other struggles. So this particular change that we need, this sort of seeing that, and this is exactly what the Buddha taught. This is not new at all. If you go through this teachings of the Buddha in what is called the Dhammapada, it has 26 chapters in which there will be something about quality of the mind, and there will be topics like that. Each one is dealing with really dealing with the quality of human you are in terms of your mind, really the mind itself only. Then we have one more Brahma Vihara, which is called Mudita, which is feeling happiness for another. That is also a beautiful expression. Can we feel happy for another? Can we feel the joy of somebody else's success? And there's a beautiful quotation here. This French mystic Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, "Joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God." So this is another thing, to allow yourself to feel joy. I actually explore this a lot because I take my dog for a walk every day. We live very close to the beach, so I go to the beach every day. And every day I see very nice sights of joy because that beach is one big photo shoot zone. So there'll be children and all ages of people, and people be having fun. And I just allow myself to enjoy the happiness which they feel. Many of them come from very far distances to play with the water, with the waves. And it's always fun to see, because when the water is coming, that anxiety of this small child, some of them will be waiting in anxiety for the water to come. Some will be waiting that the moment the water comes, they will jump. So all that is simple joy to see, great joy. So things that I experiment and I allow myself to explore. And really that type of joy comes with nature and with animals. Very nice to enjoy that thing called sympathetic joy, but we can also aim, of course, to feel it for humans. Also, there are some quotations which take you to this beautiful inner space. I won't read all of it, but I want to read this one because I haven't heard many people say it. This one by Kabir, which is Raat gawai soi ke, divas gawai khaye. Hira janam anmol tha, kodi badle jaye. Which means what? कि रात गवाई सोई के दिवस गवाई खाए, मतलब खा के दिन गवा दिए. हीरा जन्म अनमोल था, जो अंदर था वो हीरा था, लेकिन कोड़ी ना फूटी कौड़ी कहते हैं ना, कौड़ी बदले जाए, उसको वेस्ट कर दिया. वी आर वेस्टिंग आवर लाइव्स विदाउट रियलाइज कि अंदर क्या है. तो वो जो एम है, स्किप दिस, द एम ऑफ our entire self-transformation has to be to reach that inner divine state. But it cannot be reached unless we practice meditation. See, we talk about these 3 pillars of service, meditation and study, service, meditation. In my personal opinion, these 3 are not equal. 90% is meditation, 5 the others. Unless that happens, the change will not happen. No, wait. So it's very difficult to change without meditation. The meditation, the kind of meditation we need is through the self-analysis, the self-understanding. What is happening in my life? Okay. Sorry, though, you have to be quiet. So that sort of thing. Plus, because some emotions are very strong in us, we need metta or loving kindness meditation. We need the other kind of meditation, which is the seeing meditation or choiceless awareness meditation. Then, because our minds will go in so many directions, it's good to have checklists of things that we think are worth remembering. One of the things, like you must have heard of the word sati patana, sati. The word sati actually comes from the Hindi word smriti. Okay, I need to stop sharing. Basically, this is just a list of all the things that I have already talked about. I'll just stop sharing. As a do I exit?
Ma'am, it stopped.
But I'm not able to see you guys.
In the home tab, there would be the Zoom screen, the Meet screen.
Yeah, I can see this. So, the fundamental thing is, if you just remember this one thing, to try and meditate much more than you are doing. The more you meditate, the more you'll realize what's going on inside you and what are the things that need to change. And that type of focus on a concrete aim, you can that is just the quality of your mind that has to change. If you make that very concerted effort, you will find some transformation, definite transformation coming, and it's very, very nice. Because once those things that you really want to change, for example, I gave you an example that I go into this negative spiral, that something negative is happening again and again, whole day I'm thinking of the same thing, horrible. If I could change that, my God, I'd be so relieved. So you'll find relief. So I just want to inspire you guys with this, and thank you so much for patiently listening. That's it.
Wow, what a inspiring and wonderful session, ma'am. It was indeed thought-provoking. Thank you so much, Sister Vimal. Now I open the forum for any questions from the speaker. Wow, it was such an eye-opening session that everybody is busy contemplating and analyzing. So there are no questions as of now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. So I once again show my gratitude to Sister Vimal. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now let us all absorb the learnings of the day and sit in meditation for a minute. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Paschantu, Ma Kaschat Dukha Bhag Bhave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Sister Vimal, for such a wonderful session.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shruti. Thank you for hosting it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.